On Focus today, we have a research analyst from FXTM Research House, Mr. Lukman Otunuga. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me here today.
You play in the larger economy and even at the international level. So let me start by asking you that you know that Nigeria is approaching general election in the next 6 months. What kind of economy do you foresee, for the country in the light of this?
So before we take a look at what to expect from Nigeria's economy for the rest of the year, I think it's very important we take a bird's eye view of Nigeria as of now. GDP growth in the first quarter was 1.95%. Inflation continues to ease. The Naira has witnessed stability. Foreign exchange reserves remain robust and oil prices are supported. So based on these factors alone, one would think the outlook is encouraging. But I think it must be kept in mind that Nigeria still remains threatened by domestic and external risks. Domestically, we know that with the election coming soon, uncertainty could prevail, and uncertainty may impact growth. Externally, the Federal Reserve is expected to raise US interest rates 2 more times this year. When you add this with global trade tensions, weighing on sentiment and sparking risk aversion, emerging markets such as Nigeria could feel the heat. So to answer your questions, Nigeria's outlook this year could depend on how these key factors play out.
The nation's inflation management appears to be credible in the sense that it has been reducing month after month. Now, people look at it and then relate to the living standard and prices of goods and services in the market, which they seem not to be so comfortable with. What do you marry of the inflation decline and then the living standards of the people?
So looking at today's inflation data, we saw inflation hit 11.14%. So this continues to suggest that in Nigeria, inflationary pressures are slowly becoming a theme of the past. Now, if inflation continues to moderate, this could benefit the man on the streets. With inflation declining, there'll be more nairas, the purchasing power will increase, and we know that consumption is a function of economic growth. So if the Nigerians are spending, this could actually positively impact the Nigerian economy.
For more than 1 year, we've seen the Central Bank of Nigeria putting the MPR rate at 14%. At the last 2 meetings, some analysts were asking for downward trend. We did not have that. What do you think of the steady level of managing the MPR rate at 14% over a long period of time?
Well, this is very interesting as to cut or not to cut. This has been a widespread question when it comes to the CBN monetary policy. Well, initially, with inflationary pressures easing and potentially hitting single digits, market expectations were growing that the CBN would move forward with taking the action by cutting rates to 12%. However, there's a lot of factors that could cause the CBN to remain status quo. Firstly, we know the presidential elections are coming close in February 2019. So we could see a cost-push inflation scenario which boosts consumer prices. At the same time, there's been reports that the government may actually lift the national minimum wage. So all this could actually cause inflation to rebound. Now, when we look externally, as we said earlier, the Federal Reserve is expected to raise US interest rates 2 more times this year. So if the Fed is raising rates and the Central Bank of Nigeria cuts rates, this could actually widen the monetary policy divergence between both major central banks, ultimately accelerating capital outflows. And this is not what Nigeria needs right now.
Yes, you've talked about GDP. So what projection do you have for the GDP, especially in the second half of this year? And what should be the key indicators of this economic growth?
So as we know, Nigeria continues its quest to diversify away from oil reliance. But as of now, the truth be told, that Nigeria's fortune still remains tied to oil. So my expectations of GDP, if everything stays the same, GDP could mimic first quarter at 1.95%.
We've seen the US and China coming up with what many people describe as trade war, and that has also been extended to the EU, Canada, and recently Turkey. Will we really have trade war? And if we have, what impact will it make on the African continent and by extension Nigerian economy? Escalating
trade tensions between the United States and China have actually been a major theme across financial markets. Now, speculations are heightened that a trade war could become a reality. Now, if such does materialize, this only impacts global growth but poses a major threat to global stability. Now, in the event of a trade war, this would promote risk aversion, and risk aversion negatively impacts appetite for emerging markets, such as Nigeria. So this risk aversion could impact Nigerian assets. At the same time, we have to keep in mind, when we're looking at Nigeria, its two biggest trade partners are the United States and China. So the negative impacts of a trade war on those biggest economies in the world, the ripple effects could impact Nigeria as it continues to recover from an economic recession.
Mr. Otunuga, thank you very much for listening to me.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Lukman Otunuga has been my guest on Focus. He is a research fellow at FXTM Research House.
And that's it on Business Week. I leave you with the graphics of the commodities market. Join us again next week. I am Yemisi Lanrido.